So let's just begin with some background. A landscape that was consciously designed, laid out by a landscape architect, master gardener, and other professional or amateur that has aesthetic values is defined by the National Park Service and the National Register program as a designed landscape. It includes parks, campuses, estates, museums, and more. There are also historic sites, vernacular landscapes, and ethnographic landscapes, and combinations thereof. In looking at cultural landscapes with historic value, what we're looking at is evolution, recognizing that they've taken various forms over time. And the issue is, where are they today? We begin by learning from the past, knowing where you are by inventorying the existing landscape and its conditions, understanding, most importantly, continuity and change, framing where you need to go based on your opportunities, limitations, and challenges, developing a treatment plan, defining how you're going to manage, aligning that plan to management, and then framing the needs going that's effective and can retain the landscape in good condition. In addition, the last step is really to keep track and be able to understand where you are and how you can progress effectively. Now, we all recognize that it is a complex process looking at landscapes and change over time, and that we have a series of issues that jump out to us, and this kind of word map gives us a sense that we need to look at sustainability, funding, staff, volunteers, net zero carbon, equity, resilience to climate. When we're looking at historic landscapes, we understand first the Olmsted character that we've inherited and what remains of that character. In historic preservation, we look at character defining features. Oftentimes people think that the landscape is only about the vegetation, but recognize that natural systems, hydrology, land use patterns that were shaped by the Olmsted firm in creating the function and choreography of the park, the spatial organization of the park, the visual relationships, the topography and ground vegetation, circulation systems, water, rivers, wetlands, fountains, all the aspects of water in the landscape, which were nearly always included in and bridges, as well as buildings for mass scale and detail, and then small scale furnishings. In addition, the Olmsted character can be experienced with atmospheric qualities of sound, scent, light, birdsong, laughter, conversation, and more. So when you think about this process, you think about all the aspects of the landscape. At Oldfields, the Olmsted brothers, Percival Gallagher as the principal, grading to lift the green lawns and drop the drives. The entry drive loop is suppressed below the lawn so that the view over the raised turf continues along the long axis to the sculpture and pool. At a smaller scale, at Planting Field, spatial extension was created by shaping parallel paths with dense planting. The plan on the left shows the plant massing. This photo by Mattie Edwards Hewitt of 1921 provides a sense of the landscape, the light and qualities, and the separate.
All right, everybody, what we're going to do is give you a few minutes to chat with each other while we call Patricia and let her walk us through on the phone, and we'll see if we can't download a PDF so that we can get through this. So we'll turn the lights on, give you a few minutes, and see if we can't get this fixed. All right, everyone, we have Patricia on the phone. We're going to go ahead. So if you'd please have your seats. All right, Patricia, take it away.
Great. So we're looking at the U.S. Capitol, and Frederick Law Olmsted was very effective here, building not only the landscape, but also designing and having the superintendents of the West Lawn is particularly important, with a focus on the very large Capitol building. And the approach that Olmsted took here was really about land use and the focus and dominance of the Capitol itself. Next, please. So at Prospect Park for the Long Meadow, Olmsted and Vaux really focused on and elaborated the landscape in 3 zones: the Long Meadow, the ravine, and the lake. And in each case created spatial extension and views throughout those areas by a woven and elaborate circulation system. Next, please. At Planting Fields, a 409-acre estate, the Olmsted brothers used spatial extension to extend both east and west lawns beyond the large co-mansion. Next, please. For Oldfields, the Olmsted brothers, with Percival Gallagher as the principal in charge, organized the grading to lift the green areas, the lawn in front of the house and the lawn access to the pool and fountain. This is an important detail, that Olmstedian grading of circulation makes the landscape dominant in views. If you think just for one moment about driving down a highway, you'll recognize that that's completely the opposite of the way the engineers develop highways. The pavement is dominant, not the landscape around. Next. At a smaller scale, at Planting Fields, the Olmsted brothers extended space by creating parallel paths that were invisible from each other. And in this view by Mattie Edwards Hewitt in 1921, you gain a sense of the immersion in the landscape, and that there is a nearby path, but you have no view of it. Now, while this detail works well for a private estate, a public park, we often need views through for a sense of safety and a perceived ability to understand the landscape around you. Next, please. Here I show you a plan from Jackson Park, 1895. Many of you will know that 1893, this park was the site of the World Columbian Exposition. Here, the Olmsted character shaped for the exposition is reshaped to rebuild the park after the demolition of more than 200 buildings. We did a deep primary document analysis and used Olmsted form to develop a detailed design for the replanting with native plants from a 500-mile radius. Next, please. At Jackson Park, we did a deep integration of nature and culture with ecological restoration, historic preservation, and social inclusion overlapping and each as an integrated goal. The sample planting plan on the upper right shows the intensive planting approach, both on land and in water. And the funding for this was Army Corps of Engineers and Chicago Park District, targeted at native habitat. At the same time, the project had to be approved by the State Historic Preservation Office. So a simple green wash was inappropriate. What we were able to do was gain an approved plan, work with over 300 diverse native species, plant over 1 million new flowering forbs and grasses in 74 distinct plant communities and 10 ecosystem types, to create a circulation system that would recapture 12 overlooks, and to build 10,000 linear feet of pathways that we called haul roads and used to create the actual construction work, mimicking the historic trail system that was lost. So throughout the project, informing an ecological restoration with the historic preservation documentation. Next, please. These three views captured for you the Hayes Lagoon, which was truncated and filled, and how in this project we were able to reshape a derelict, very unattractive and water stagnant area of the park to bring a path through it, to replant it with native species that were knee-high and below, and to replace the scenic quality of this specific area within the park. Next. So back to framing where you are going, you need to develop an overall, what's called a preservation treatment plan. It can also be called, and often is called, a master plan. This is a historically informed plan that is also deeply informed by the current situation. There are 4 preservation treatments in the Secretary of Interior standards. The one most frequently used is rehabilitate, which combines respect and adaptation. At planting fields, we had multiple goals. You can see here with the colored dots, to restore aspects of the historic design, to expand and manage the arboretum collections, to uplift and present ecological and scenery, to enhance the visitor experience, and to make maintenance and service more functional. Next, please. As we do in all projects these days, we bring forward the Sustainable Development Goals. In this case, we highlighted 5 of the 17 goals: good health and well-being, safe and sustainable cities, climate action, life on land, and the final goal of partnerships, to look at an integrated approach to carrying out the historically informed master plan. Next, please. So a part of the process at Planting Fields was to integrate the field habitat for birds and pollinators. When you have productive landscape historically, you can manage that in the future as meadows, native grass, and wildflower for pollinators and birds. planting fields is on the Atlantic Flyway. We have a challenge with field birds all over the planet, and the management of these fields for late mowing and potentially just one annual haying with partial retention to protect overwintering cocoon will then allow pollinator and field bird habitat. Next, please. Our most recent project to implement the master plan for planting field was to look over time at the end of the Co-era, 1956. What was the entry LA at that time? 4 rows wide, beech trees. And at 2019 on the right, a complete loss of the continuity of that beech LA. We chose, instead of beech, oaks. Next, please. And here we have a pre-planting view with a simulation that shows the small oaks. We used chinkapins in the foreground and the second row white oaks on both sides. 101 trees planted this year in order to replace the feature, but not replace with beech, which has a number of very serious disease and pest vectors. Next, please. In addition to replacing the LA, we were able to integrate and grade into the landscape a new accessible walk that crosses from the parking lot to provide access to Coe Hall and the east and west lawn, and to the Synoptic Garden, which is a collection of arboretum plants. Next. Another important aspect of the Olmsted brothers' approach, with Frederick Dawson as the principal in this case, is the grading. You noted on the prior slide the curvilinear of that walkway. The Olmsted idiom never has a flat segment. They design their alignments as spiral curve. The top view shows you a flat tangent and a circular arc. This is standard engineering practice. The lower image shows you a spiral curve where the radial length changes across the curves and they simply meet without a flat segment. This is a very important aspect of the feeling of grace and ease in an Olmsted landscape. Next, please. Another important aspect that we focused on at Planting Fields was to understand the benefits of the replanting of the entry LA. And this image shows you the growth and change over 45 years. Next, please. At Planting Fields, these oak tree benefits can be calculated. These are on the Arbor Day tree calculation website. You provide your caliper inches and you look at your tree type, and it gives you the calculations for carbon sequestration, for gallons of stormwater absorbed, and for the benefits of the shade in terms of conserved energy. So all the work we do, we look at the climate and draw down and habitat benefits. Next, please. This image shows you a current view and the view at 45 years out with the oak trees grown up. This was important for gaining funding for the project, as were the calculations of the oak tree benefits. Next, please. So there's a wealth of federal preservation guidance, the Secretary of Interior's standards for treatment of historic properties with guidelines for the treatment of cultural landscapes is a first source. There's a National Register Bulletin 18 that looks at evaluating and nominating designed historic landscapes. Preservation Brief 36, Protecting Cultural Landscapes. And all of these can be found on the nationalparkservice.gov site. You can look up cultural landscapes, or you can use this URL. Next, please. So let me end with a note on why I believe cultural landscapes are ideal for planetary rights. In 2021, the UN Convention on Biodiversity put out a number that 75% of the planetary surface was deeply altered by humanity. These are cultural landscapes, the combined work of nature and humanity. Some of these, of course, are not good landscapes, but we have all of our public parks as important aspects of landscape that is a shared asset. The notion of planetary rights, which has come into the literature in recent years, brings respect for our living earth forward and all life, including but not centered on humanity and human rights. Part of our problem these days is that our communal platform of shared landscapes are considered principally for their human benefits. We need to look at all the benefits of landscapes, not only those that accrue to humanity. Our parks are irreplaceable assets, and we can use them to uplift the planet and people. Thank you for your attention.
So Patricia, we want to thank you for your patience. Let me just see if we have any questions for you in the audience. I know we will make this PDF available to everyone so that you can see it again after the conference. But do we have any questions for Patricia? So the question is, Patricia, how does the work that you do become converted to mainstream as opposed and more holistic and broader, I guess, rather than just specific projects?
Well, I think that the coming to mainstream is about having enough work done that uses the same basis, the same approach, and integration of cultural values and natural values. I think one way, of course, of bringing it toward mainstream is informing this group today.
The question is, how can low resource communities pursue the regimen that you've just outlined?
Well, I think the first piece of that is citizen advocacy. Many communities have low resources. This type of planning is not any more or less expensive than planning that is less well integrated. And what we found is that there is a huge interest in integrated projects. So, for example, a project that includes building a meadow might be funded by a local foundation that cares about ecology and field bird habitat and pollinators. The example I'm giving is simply an expression of the fact that you often need to consider any project as if it were a series of patches of a quilt and go forward with one at a time, understanding where you are going. We have found that good planning brings support, and that a good plan that you understand the steps you're taking and you know where you want to go will gain funding step by step.
We have a non-controversial question. What is your response to the Obama Presidential Center's construction in Jackson Park?
Yeah. Well, the good news is that we completed that project before the Obama Center negotiations were underway. And the project we did put a spotlight on the value of the park, which changed that negotiation. We also are in the process of aiding the Chicago Park District along the lines of the project work we did in the mitigation required as a part of the enlargement of Lakeshore Drive and the loss of the drive immediately adjacent to the Obama Center. So political realities are what they are. When you break eggs, you make an omelet.
That was a beautiful response, Patricia. Thank you. At this point, we are going to say goodbye. We really, again, appreciate your patience. We will get the PDF out. And thank you ever so much for your thoughts on how we adapt historic landscapes. So thank you, Patricia.
My pleasure. Hope everyone has a great meeting.